week, we continue our discussion with Pete Kennedy of the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund, where he'll describe the great apple muffin and oatmeal cookie confiscation by authorities in Michigan, several more ways in which our food freedoms are assaulted, and how Peter's role at the fund helps real farmers make a living while thoughtful consumers get access to the health-promoting foods that they want. Coming up next on the Nutrition Heretic podcast. So I'm sure you've heard that as you age, it gets harder to lose weight. Well, that's total bull because my friends Laura and Veronica Chows, they can prove it. They're a mother-daughter duo, and they've lost 125 pounds between the two of them at ages 50 and 20. And they've kept it off for over 2 years without starvation, deprivation, or hunger. So now you can learn their system and a whole lot more with a free 10-day trial to their online membership. They'll give you the diet, the recipes, classes, and more. Sign up today at nutritionheretic.com/utmost-diet.
Fat is bad for you.
I just pop a pill and I'm fine.
Meat is murder.
It's time for bad food punishment. It's time for real nourishment. It's time for the Nutrition Heretic.
The following program is provided as information only and may not be construed as medical or health advice. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease. No action or inaction should be taken solely on the basis of the information provided here. Please consult with a licensed healthcare professional or doctor on any matter relating to your health and well-being. Now, we've focused clearly on raw milk so far. What are some, actually, I'm just going to read this headline. Michigan MDARD, I'm assuming they're called, seeks destruction order for 18 oatmeal cookies and 17 apple muffins. What's going on?
Well, that's a bit dramatic.
Yes.
I mean, come on now, cookies and muffins. I mean, I don't eat a lot of cookies, and I'm not the biggest fan of sugar. However, what's going on there?
Well, that really did happen. That case originated when one of these herd share dairies in Michigan, I described herd shares to you earlier,
right,
was accused of making several people sick. And again, it looks to me like it's typical. You get 1, 2, or 3 people that get sick, and somehow they blame the dairy where there's really not that much evidence. And that was true in this case. But initially, these investigators came to the farm and they insisted that they see the farmer's shareholder list, and present that as an intrusion of privacy, just given the lack of evidence they'd had that the dairy was responsible. I mean, the farmer refused to let them on, so they came back with a warrant, and they, in the process of their search, just this farmer has a milk room, there's a table there. A lot of times, she produces high quality milk. People come from just a good bit, an hour or more, some cases, and to pick up the milk. And there are other members of leaseholders there who also might make their own foods, and maybe want to make a little money, and at the same time, just provide the leaseholders something to eat when they're producing their milk. And just this inspector saw these cookies and muffins, and usually they are exempt from regulation under the Michigan Cottage Foods Bill, except that there has to be a label just saying this was prepared in an uninspected kitchen and, the name of the producer. I mean, the only people who really came to that farm were members of the leaseholders. We've always thought there should be a distinction between the public and private distribution of food.
Right.
And if ever there was a case where there should have been that distinction, it was this one. But the inspector, to me, just didn't use a whole lot of common sense. He took the cookies, he took the muffins. The farmer actually had a bottle of kombucha for her own consumption there. He took that because it wasn't labeled. So, and then someone had paid for a couple dozen eggs that I guess one of the other shareholders had dropped off. One of the leaseholders had paid for a couple dozen eggs. Another one of the leaseholders had dropped off. So he, confiscated the eggs. Said if she wanted to continue with that arrangement, she needed a food warehousing permit. So, and the whole thing was this farmer didn't make a dime out of any of the foods that were confiscated. She was just doing it as an accommodation to her leaseholders.
Right.
So it was just over the top. And the trouble is some of these food laws are just so broad, like the Michigan food law, that technically maybe it was a violation, but just how about a little common sense, and how about reforming the law?
Right.
So there is a clear distinction between the two, because this is crazy. These people don't want, they're not interested in the government's protection. They're interested in not having their food confiscated.
Right. Given the nature of these items that were taken, it's making me think of like church and school bake sales. Sometimes here when people have a yard sale, they'll also do a little bit of a bake sale. Their kids will put up a little stand with some brownies and lemonade, let's say. Is all of this going to be under attack too?
Well, they've shut down lemonade stands before, I think. There was one where, I think this was in California, they were initially thinking of fining the stand a significant sum of money until, someone restored sanity somehow. The legislature needs to understand that you've got more and more of these just private types of models for the distribution of food. There are more of these buyers clubs where someone meets in at somebody's house, another member of the buyers club. The different members of the buyers club make products for only buyers club members. They get a little money out of it. That's really none of the government's business unless there's some kind of credible evidence that adulterated product is being distributed. If that's the case, sure, the government has the power to break up a church picnic. But until then, it's really none of their business. Right. And it's just seems like a waste of resources when you see all the imported food that's coming into this country right now. That's where focusing their attention, I think.
Or reining in the GMO. Let's start at home, right?
Yeah.
Between the pesticides.
And unfortunately,
I was just saying, and with the pesticides and all the other stuff we're letting into our food system. Yeah, let's look in our own backyards first.
Right, and unfortunately, it doesn't look like the GMOs are going to be reined in at all.
No, we're very sensitive to that here in Hawaii, where they admit we have a very fragile ecosystem. It was granted, right. Yes, the British brought over things, the Portuguese brought over things, the Americans brought over things, the Japanese, yada, yada, yada. However, while people are getting detained at the airport for having an apple from the mainland, Monsanto is freely growing their GMO papaya on many of the islands. And they tried to GMO the taro. They tried to GM, many, or I should say GE, many of the foods down here. You can't tell me that my apple is worse than any of this crap you guys are bringing in.
Well, yeah, and unfortunately, it just seems like Hawaii's kind of a laboratory experiment for companies like Monsanto, which it's
criminal.
Yeah, it is. It's totally, there's no science behind it at all, and they're trying to pass it off as regular food when it's not.
Right.
But it's doesn't look like that's going to be changing with the new administration, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. Now, actually, you brought up Sally's name. She mentioned something decades ago, and I'm not sure if this was ever true. Was it true at one point that there was a law being proposed that people could not let their dogs outside? And that on the back end, the idea was that, at least keep them outside. On the back end, the idea was that they would rein in grass farming.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard that, so I can't.
Okay.
I can't tell you. I mean, we've dealt with a number of crazy laws, but yeah, I haven't heard about that.
Oh, okay. So what are some of the other things, because, some people might be listening and they're going, oh, well, I don't care because I don't drink raw milk. And, no matter how much you and I know that people have been healed by this. And actually, we've even gotten Nicola on the raw milk train. But since listening to this and the Weston A. Price podcast, yeah, so, what are some of the surprising places where people don't realize that their food freedom is being assaulted, and that, one day the only choice they're going to have, if this continues in this direction, the only choice they're going to have is the nasty swill that's made from pus and blood infected milk, the, packaged nonsense, the GMOs, etc. What are some of the surprising places that you think people just aren't even considering right now?
Well, one area we're working on right now is to, in effect, repeal the Wholesome Meat Act. It was an amendment to the Federal Meat Inspection Act in 1967. What happened was, when they passed that amendment, the agency, USDA, basically took over state meat and poultry regulation, and the state could inspect, do their own inspection instead of the feds, but their standards had to be at least as strict as the feds. And what happened was it just drove the cost up of complying with the law. That I think back in 1967 there were about 10,000 slaughterhouses in this country, and today they're less than 3,000.
Oh.
And what's that done? What that's done in states like Florida, where I am, is a lot of these states don't have state inspected slaughterhouses. They only have federally inspected slaughterhouses and custom houses. And in Florida, it's difficult to get access to the federally inspected slaughterhouses. Some of them are just for the bigger outfits, these vertically integrated food companies, which control everything from start to finish, including the slaughterhouses. And then you have these custom houses where the only people who can get meat are the people who own the animal at the time of slaughter. And most states limit the number of owners you can have. And what that does is cuts down the market for small grass-fed farmers, because there are plenty of people who be willing to buy meat from them by the cut, but they can't get into the slaughterhouse. They can't get access to the slaughterhouse. I mean, there's some states where they do have some access, where I've heard it. They have to make a reservation to get their animals slaughtered a year before time. And so what you have is that the demand for this local grass-fed meat isn't being met in a lot of areas in the countries. So, your freedom of choice in those areas is, do you want McDonald's or do you want Burger King? It's not the way many people think it is. Again, this is Representative Massey. He's working on a bill that would allow the sale of custom processed meat by the cut if the state legislature passed a law. So that's one area where people think they might have food choices, but many areas of the country, they're much more limited than they realize.
Right. So tell us a little bit, because I've asked you so much about the laws and the milk and the meat and all these things. Tell us what your role is at Farm to Consumer and how you support both the farmer as well as the consumer.
Well, I mean, right now I work on the day-to-day member services. If there's a problem with a regulator, they might call up. I'll deal with that again. And I've worked on, these food seizure type cases before. The one thing I forgot to say about the muffins and the cookies is that before that, just about all the food seizures we did are dairy. So this was new for us. The other thing I do, though, is I work on policy, work with members of states in drafting legislation to ease create a more favorable regulatory climate. One of the things we found out is you can have best soil, healthiest livestock, great marketing plan, but if you've got a poor regulatory climate, it doesn't matter. I mean, ultimately, our goal is just to give people the choice to buy directly from an unlicensed, unregulated producer if that's what they want. But Now, on a day-to-day basis, we're just trying to deregulate somewhat, create more favorable regulations for producers to operate in. And on the policy level, we've basically been working in like 4 or 5 core areas. I mean, one is these cottage foods where people are, producers are able to sell baked goods, jams, jellies, maybe fermented vegetable products with little or no regulation. And most of the states have passed cottage foods laws by now. Some are definitely better than others, but it's a trend that's gone in the right direction. Then just a second area would be on-farm processed poultry.
Okay.
There's a federal law that allows farmers to slaughter and process up to 20,000 birds a year on their property.
Wow.
Without inspection. Inspection meaning no one has to be present when the slaughtering is taking place.
Right.
And we actually, for people that are interested, we actually just put up a poultry map on our website,
Oh, cool.
just detailing the exemptions at 1,000 birds and 20,000 birds. And we're detailing which states have adopted both exemptions, which have adopted just the 1,000, what states have adopted kind of a hybrid, and what states haven't adopted any. And the only state that hasn't adopted either exemption is, surprise, surprise, Arkansas, the home of Tyson Foods.
Mm.
That's a second area. I mean, just there's a federal, there's this federal exemption. It's up to the states to adopt it. And we just worked on legislation where a state does formally adopt it. I mean, it's one of the better, this federal poultry exemption is one of the better food bills that Congress has ever passed.
Right.
And then just a third area would be on-farm slaughter of meat animals and custom slaughter. I mean, this bill we were talking about, which is called the Prime Act, is one of our efforts there. But, the federal exemption allows more leeway than a lot of the states are using right now. Like you can slaughter animals on your own farm. I mean, what I've been told by USDA is that as long as you have at least a partial ownership, you being the farmer, other people can have an ownership interest in that animal too, and you can give, as long as the interest was there at the time slaughter took place, you can distribute milk to those other folks. And then we have just raw milk and raw milk products that's a separate area all on its own. Like I said, most of the states have allowed the legal distribution of raw milk in one form or another. Surprisingly, not that many have allowed the sale or distribution of cream, butter, or not nearly as many other products. Because, I mean, I think overall raw milk has a good track record for safety, but almost no one gets sick off butter from what I've seen, and very few people from raw cream. So, yeah, it's kind of 2 steps in that area: get the raw milk laws out of the way, then just try and get the laws allowing the sale or distribution of value-added raw dairy products. I mean, even though it's definitely not a safety issue, again, value-added is where it is. So the dairy industry is reluctant to let raw milk farmers get a piece of that action. And then finally, 5th area, the one you'd ultimately like to see is, I just call super cottage foods, which is practically any food you can sell. I mean, there are some exceptions because of the Federal Meat Inspection Act. Just short of that, or actually the Federal Poultry Act too, but short of that, just about any food can be sold. And for instance, we were talking about the unaged raw cheeses. I mean, the states can sell those. I mean, state law, you can sell those within intra-state commerce right now.
Okay.
But it's just not that many states have passed laws on that, probably due to pressure from FDA, USDA, or both agencies. So Wyoming actually passed a bill a couple years ago where, except for meat products, anything else can be sold without a permit, direct farmer to consumer, or home kitchen to consumer. So, from a food safety standpoint, you've got what the food safety people call transparency or traceability. It's not like getting sick on a hamburger at a restaurant where the meat comes from 8 different countries and 10 different states. With this local food, it's a matter of picking up the phone, calling the producer. So you've got this tight loop, and in some cases, like these herd, the herd lease example I gave to you earlier, I just call it a closed loop transaction,
Right.
where there's complete transparency and traceability. I mean, I've seen cases where it did look like actually someone did get sick from consuming raw milk, and it was through one of these herd share agreements. And yeah, there's no need to put out a public announcement. Like usually when there's a recall or there's a suspicion people got sick from a particular food, they'll announce it on the nightly news, put it in the papers. The department will issue a press release. Sometimes the producer will issue a press release. Well, I've seen a couple of these herd share cases where there's no need to issue any release. I mean, all the people who could have been affected were covered.
Right.
By, either the farmer sending out, giving a heads up, or the investigator.
Right. Yeah. And it doesn't even make sense for that to hit the public eye if it's 20 people involved, and they can, it's one thing when you're crossing 7 states to get your spinach or scallions or whatever to people. And then definitely you need to know across, have it out on the news.
Well, just one other thing I was going to say, Adrian, was that one of the things we're worried about is this FDA Food Safety Modernization Act, which is just there are exemptions to, which fortunately most of our members qualify from some of the worst provisions of it, but it is something that can put a lot of people out of business if they are subject to those provisions. Right. There's a food safety plan requirement for food processing, which is very onerous if you're subject to it. And there's there are national produce safety standards for most or many produce growers. And what this is going to do, I think, is increase our reliance on imported food. Because supposedly they're going to inspect the foreign firms too, but they're not going to inspect them as much. They might rely on a third party where maybe a thorough job isn't as done with the inspection as it should have been.
And
so I think,
sorry to cut in, but this is what is happening here in Croatia, because there was a recent outbreak of salmonella. So I'm not sure how do you say it in English, but the thing is, it's the same thing Peter was talking about happened here. So a lot of our own food doesn't get used. We used to produce all of our foods, and now more than half, if not more than 17% of food is being imported. And what happened was that chicken, which came through the customs, wasn't properly inspected. So there were major failures in both chicken and eggs. And that caused quite a bit of illness. And I think around 3 or 4 people died from it. It was a major mistake. And it was really showing the difference between how domestic products are being inspected and handled and how imported goods are being inspected, because they don't go by the batch. They go, they take one sample and they do just not a really thorough job with it. And if everything is right, then the whole shipment can go in. There's no problem whatsoever. And they're far more scrutinous with domestic products, and you're less likely to encounter any disease with our products. But since the majority of the produce is being imported, it's less likely to run into our own products that are being sold as as domestic, as a product of this country.
Yeah. And what you're getting, I don't think FDA has ever said they've inspected more than something like 2% of the imported food. It might even be just 1%.
Yeah.
So you're getting all this food, possibly made under unsanitary conditions coming in from thousands of miles away. These long supply chains, and it's just, food production is the first part of your national defense. I think you want your communities and regions to be as self-sufficient in food production as possible. I mean, the kind of farmers who are members, I look at them as frontline healers. I mean, they just produce the quality that benefits health, doesn't hurt it. And this reliance and emphasis on exports and imports, these trade deals are just really destructive to our nation's agriculture.
Yeah, because we are in the European Union, and it is part of the deal when you step in. You know, you have these regulations, how much you must, how much are you obliged to import. So there's that question as well. And most of the things that we import are completely unnecessary because we can produce all of them right here and with far better quality.
Yeah, I noticed last time. I was just going to say that last time I went to Spain, I noticed the same thing. Like, you cannot get a Spanish-grown vegetable, pretty much. Like, almost everything comes from some other part of Europe or Africa.
Yeah.
There's very, very little. And actually, I did find a few grapes one day. And I think it was in Barcelona. I found some grapes that were local, I was told were local, and they were all moldy. And that was the extent of it. But everything else, of which there wasn't even that much variety to begin with, but still, it all was imported from France, England, North Africa, etc.
And I think, there are just policies out there that are designed to make countries more dependent on imported food. One example of that is just when the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund get part of the solution the World Bank or IMF comes up with is to help them pay down the debt by producing food for export. So they cut down the production of foods that are consumed in their own countries and ramp up the foods produced for export. It doesn't promote food security at all.
Right. Yeah. It's pretty entangled for sure. Now, one of the things that you also do there at Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund is you actually help the farmers when they get accosted by government agency to see through their legal bills, correct?
Right. Our members get a lot for what they pay. Just our annual fees for farmers are $125 a year. And what they get with that, they get unlimited consultation with attorneys on matters that are within our mission statement. We have a toll-free hotline if, there's a unfriendly surprise visit from a government inspector. We usually have an attorney available to help them through that. We also have a farmer that get farm consultations with us. And if there is like a formal judicial or administrative hearing, what usually happens, and with very rare exceptions, is that if we have a legal committee, if they vote to take on the particular case, it's not going to cost the farmer a dime beyond their membership. I mean, the best example I can give you is our acting president, Elizabeth Rich, won a case in Wisconsin a few years ago. She was co-counsel along with this other Wisconsin attorney. We had a member, Vernon Hirschberger, that was charged with 4 criminal misdemeanors for violating the state food and dairy law. And it was a 5-day trial. There were all kinds of pre-trial hearings. He wound up getting acquitted on 3 of the 4 counts. And the one count he was found guilty of didn't stop him from continuing on what he was doing. But anyway, our expenses through that trial were probably $60,000 to $65,000, where I've had attorneys tell me if that was handled by a private firm, it might have been 8 to 10 times that, maybe even more.
Holy mackerel.
So, yeah. And I'm sure the state of Wisconsin spent a lot more money on the case than we did.
Right. Well.
So, yeah, I mean, we try and level the playing field, and if we're representing someone, just the state's chances of depleting the farmer, their resources go down. I mean, we can't pay their feed bill or their personal expenses, but we can take all their legal expenses. So the chances of the state just winning some kind of war of attrition decrease.
Well, thank you so much for the work that you do, because without people, you're an attorney. You could have gone in any direction, not you personally necessarily, but you know what I'm saying. Many people get into it for the money, let's just say. And it's incredibly heartening to know that you're truly standing up for the little guy, and probably the most integral person in our lives, our collective lives, is our farmers. Whether or not people want to believe that, even if they think they're comfortable eating all imports, whatever, these food freedoms are incredibly important to safeguard, and the implications for other countries as well, because so many countries use the U.S. model, whether through bullying on our part or just wanting to be part of this so-called progressive society. Modern society. A lot of countries, particularly I saw a lot in the Caribbean, of countries that were adopting a lot of similar laws. So yes, thank you so much.
Well, one thing I can tell you for sure, Adrienne, is we are a true grassroots organization. We've never taken a dime in government funding. The only corporate money, as far as I know, that we've gotten has been from small, like-minded business, and the bulk of our revenue, membership fees and individual donations, most of which are not tax deductible. Thankfully, within the past year or so, we've formed a sister 501c3 foundation, which is meant to help out with our litigation efforts. But we've just maintained our independence and haven't let any corporate or government money get in the way of us carrying out our mission.
Right. Well, congratulations on that. And again, thank you. Any parting words before we let you go?
Well, I encourage people to join. Everybody eats. So even if you're not a farmer, you're still a consumer. You can go to our website at www.farmtoconsumer.org. It's www.farmtoconsumer.org. You can join online if you have any further questions or any questions about our organization. There's an email address and a number there you can call. But we're people that are passionate about what we do, and we think we made an impact and want to make a bigger one.
All right. Well, thank you so much again. Everybody, please go to farmtoconsumer.org to learn more and to donate. Remember from the episode with Charlotte Smith, every 2 years she was shopping for milk and meat again because her farmers were going out of business, and not only for the financial issue of just not charging enough for their products, but also possibly because some of them were put out of business by corporations and our own government. Farmtoconsumer.org, check it out. Thank you so much, and please keep us up to date, Peter, with your developments and your successes.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, Adrienne.
Okay. Oh, thank you. The Nutrition Heretic Podcast is a production of Savor the Journey, LLC. Our audio editor is Nicola Popovich. Our podcast manager is Crystal McLean, and our operations manager is Michelle Med. I'm your host, Adrienne Hugh, the Nutrition Heretic. You can find us at the new and improved nutritionheretic.com, where you can download the Nutrition Heretic's free shit list of 7 health foods to avoid like the plague. You can also listen to previous episodes at nutritionheretic.com/podcast. Be sure to like us on social media for updates. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/nutritionheretic and on Twitter @NutriHeretic. Contact us with show ideas, questions, or if you want to be a guest. And don't forget to rate our podcast on iTunes and Stitcher.